Have you ever wondered how a single moment can change the entire course of your life? How one small act of kindness can open the door to a second chance you never thought possible? In the quiet corners of life, sometimes the most meaningful, connections begin with something as small as a lost item. For Grace Parker, it was just another Tuesday at Aspen Heights Ski Resort in Denver, Colorado. The 26-year-old ski instructor had spent her entire life in these mountains, teaching wealthy tourists how to navigate the slopes she knew like the back of her hand. Grace was known for her quiet demeanor. She kept to herself, her gaze often lowered when guests from New York or Los Angeles would chat about their luxury penthouses or recent European vacations. In a world of designer ski suits and diamond-studded watches, Grace felt invisible in her well-worn resort uniform. Her colleagues called her the ghost, always present, yet somehow fading into the background. "Last group for today, Grace," her supervisor called out, handing her the schedule for the afternoon beginners class. "Mostly regulars, but there's a new name on the list. Some businessman from California." Grace nodded, carefully tucking a strand of her chestnut hair behind her ear as she glanced at the paper. She wasn't one for small talk with the wealthy elite who frequented the resort. She simply did her job, taught them to stay upright on the bunny slopes, and collected her modest paycheck at the end of the week. What Grace couldn't have known that crisp winter morning was that fate had carefully arranged for her path to cross with someone who would change everything she thought she knew about wealth, loss, and second chances. The resort had emptied for the evening when Grace noticed something glinting in the snow near the edge of Blue Spruce Trail. The setting sun caught it just right, sending a golden reflection across the pristine white slope. She might have missed it entirely on any other day. Kneeling down, Grace brushed away the powdery snow to reveal a man's wedding band. It was a simple gold ring, but clearly expensive, heavy in her palm with an inscription inside that read, "To my eternity, J." Something about the ring touched Grace's heart. Someone had lost not just jewelry, but a piece of their love story. Without hesitation, she slipped it into her pocket and headed to the resort's lost and found office. "You should just keep it," Claire Hamilton suggested when Grace showed her the ring. Claire was the resort owner's daughter, tall, perfectly styled, and never missing an opportunity to remind Grace of the social chasm between them. "It's probably worth more than you make in a month. No one ever checks lost and found anyway." But Grace simply shook her head. "It's not about the money. This means something to someone." That evening, she carefully crafted a small notice. "Found men's wedding band on Blue Spruce Trail. Please contact Grace at the ski school office with description to claim." She placed it on the resort's community board, tucked the ring into a small velvet pouch, and locked it in her locker, unaware that her simple act of integrity was about to set extraordinary events in motion. In a rented luxury cabin less than a mile away, 35-year-old Ryan Sullivan stared into the crackling fire, an empty whiskey glass dangling from his fingertips. The successful tech entrepreneur had come to Colorado seeking escape from his memories, from his empty mansion in California, from the pitying glances of friends and business associates. It had been 3 years since the private plane carrying his wife Jennifer had crashed in the Swiss Alps. 3 years of existing rather than living. 3 years of wearing his wedding ring like both a shield and a prison. Last night, in a moment of drunken clarity or perhaps temporary madness, he had pulled the ring from his finger and hurled it into the darkness while standing on Blue Spruce Trail. A symbolic gesture. A desperate attempt to finally let go. Now, in the sobering light of day, a complicated mix of relief and regret washed over him. He hadn't expected to feel so hollow. What Ryan couldn't have anticipated was spotting a small, handwritten notice on the resort's community board the next morning. A notice about a wedding band found on Blue Spruce Trail. His wedding band. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, even to himself, he didn't immediately approach the lost and found. Instead, he found himself signing up for beginner skiing. Lessons with an instructor named Grace Parker. Sometimes the universe offers us not what we ask for, but exactly what we need. And sometimes the things we throw away find their way back to us in the most unexpected ways. If you've ever Wondered whether second chances are possible, whether healing can come in the most unexpected packages. Stay with me, because Grace and Ryan's story is only just beginning, and what happens next might just restore your faith in the power of simple kindness and unexpected connections. The next morning, Grace arrived early at the ski school, unaware that her life was about to change. She pulled her thick woolen scarf tighter around her neck as she prepared for the day's first lesson. The schedule showed 4 students, 3 regulars and 1 new name, Ryan Sullivan. "Is this where I check in for the beginner's lesson?" a deep voice asked from behind her. Grace turned to find a tall man with dark hair, flecked with premature grey at the temples. Despite his casual ski attire, there was something about the way he carried himself that spoke of boardrooms and business deals. His eyes, a striking shade of blue, held a peculiar mix of confidence and vulnerability that caught Grace off guard. "Yes, you must be Mr. D. Sullivan," she replied, her voice softer than usual. "I'm Grace Parker, your instructor. Please, call me Ryan," he said, offering a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. There was something guarded about him, as if he was carrying an invisible weight. As they waited for the other students, Ryan's gaze fell on the community board where Grace's notice about the ring was posted. She noticed how his expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a momentary flicker of recognition quickly masked by casual indifference. "Lost and found seems busy," he commented, nodding toward the board. "Oh, that. Yes, I found a wedding. Ring yesterday on Blue Spruce Trail," Grace explained, not noticing how Ryan's hand instinctively moved to his bare ring finger. "That seemed important. I hope whoever lost it comes forward." Their conversation was interrupted as the other students arrived, and soon they were heading to the bunny slopes for the day's lesson. Grace was surprised to find that despite claiming to be a beginner, Ryan had a natural athleticism that suggested he'd spent time on skis before. "You're picking this up unusually fast for a first-timer," she observed during a break. Ryan shrugged. "I used to ski years ago, but it's been a while. I thought it best to start from the beginning again." Something in the way he said it made Grace wonder if he was talking about more than just skiing. Over the next few days, Ryan continued to attend Grace's lessons, gradually revealing bits of himself. He was from California. He worked in tech. He was staying in Colorado for an extended break from his regular life. What he didn't mention was that he was worth millions, or that the ring Grace had found had once been his. Meanwhile, Claire Hamilton had noticed the growing connection between Grace and the handsome newcomer. During an upscale party at the IEC Resort's main lodge that weekend, Claire cornered Ryan at the bar. "Ryan Sullivan," she purred, extending a manicured hand. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Claire Hamilton. My father owns this resort." Ryan politely shook her hand. "Nice to meet you." "I see you've been spending quite a bit of time with our Grace," Claire continued, emphasizing "our" in a way that made Grace sound like a possession. "She's such a sweet, simple girl. Salt of the earth, really." Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly. "She seems very genuine." "That's refreshing." Claire leaned closer, lowering her voice confidentially. "Just between us, you might want to be careful. Grace has a bit of a history of becoming very attached to our wealthier guests, especially the single ones." The lie rolled off her tongue with practiced ease, but Ryan's expression remained neutral. "Is that so? Thank you for your concern." As Claire sauntered away, satisfied with having planted the seed of doubt, she didn't notice Ryan's thoughtful gaze following Grace as she quietly served drinks to guests on the other side of the room, her resort uniform markedly different from the designer outfits surrounding her. The next morning, Ryan arrived early for his lesson, finding Grace alone at the ski school. "I didn't know you worked the bar as well as teaching," he remarked. Grace's cheeks flushed slightly. "I pick up extra shifts when I can. Denver isn't cheap, even on the outskirts." "Do you enjoy it here?" he asked, genuinely curious. Grace paused, considering her answer. "The mountains are in my blood. My father taught skiing here before his knees gave out. My mother cleans rooms at the lodge at this place. It's home even if I don't quite fit in with the crowd." Something about her honesty touched Ryan. It had been years since he'd spoken to someone who wasn't trying to impress him or gain something from him. "Would you have coffee with me?" he asked suddenly. After the lesson, I mean, just to talk. Grace hesitated, Claire's warning words from her first day echoing in her mind. Don't forget your place here. The guests aren't your friends, they're just passing through. But something about Ryan's eyes, the sadness she glimpsed beneath the surface, made her nod. I'd like that. Their coffee stretched into a 2-hour conversation. Ryan shared stories about growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Sacramento before moving to Silicon Valley. Grace talked about her dreams of someday opening a small ski school for local kids who couldn't afford the resort's expensive lessons. What Ryan didn't share was how refreshing it felt to be with someone who knew nothing about his wealth or his tragic past. What Grace didn't say was how for the first time she didn't feel invisible. As they were leaving the coffee shop, Ryan finally broached the subject of the ring. That wedding band you found, has anyone claimed it yet? Grace shook her head. No, not yet. I check every day. It seems strange that no one would miss something so meaningful. Ryan looked away, his jaw tightening. Maybe they meant to lose it. Maybe it was too painful to keep. That's a sad thought, Grace replied. Even painful memories are still part of who we are. Ryan felt her words sink deep into his chest, touching a place he had kept carefully guarded. That night he stood at the window of his rented cabin, staring at the distant lights of the resort, wondering if he should just tell her the truth. Meanwhile, Claire had been watching their growing closeness with increasing resentment. Having set her sights on Ryan from the moment she'd learned about his tech fortune, she wasn't about to let someone like Grace Parker steal what she considered rightfully hers. The next morning, she approached Grace in the locker room, her smile not reaching her cold eyes. You and Mr. Sullivan seemed to be hitting it off, she observed, leaning against the lockers. Grace continued organizing her equipment, not rising to the bait. He's nice. Do you even know who he is? Claire asked, examining her perfectly manicured nails. When Grace didn't respond, she continued. Ryan Sullivan, founder of Secure Sync Technologies, worth about $500 million last I checked. Grace froze, her hand on her locker door. Oh, he didn't mention that. Claire's voice dripped with false sympathy. Interesting. I wonder what else he hasn't told you. As Claire walked away, satisfied with having planted the seed of doubt, Grace stood motionless, feeling the weight of the velvet pouch containing Ryan's ring in her pocket. Suddenly, she wondered if their connection had been genuine at all, or if she'd been nothing more than a passing distraction for a wealthy tourist. What she couldn't have known was that at that exact moment, Ryan was drafting an email to his executive team, extending his leave of absence indefinitely. For the first time in 3 years, he was feeling something besides grief and isolation. He wasn't ready to let that go, even if he wasn't sure exactly what to call it yet. And so, with misunderstandings beginning to cloud the clear mountain air, Grace and Ryan continued their dance of half-truths and unspoken feelings, unaware of the storm Claire was brewing that threatened to tear apart their fragile connection before it had truly begun. As January gave way to February, the relationship between Grace and Ryan deepened, despite the growing complications surrounding them. They spent most days on the slopes and evenings talking in the quiet corner of the resort's cafe. For Ryan, each moment with Grace was like taking a breath of fresh air after years of suffocation. For Grace, Ryan's presence made her feel truly seen for perhaps the first time in her life, but Claire's poisonous words had taken root in Grace's mind. Why would a millionaire tech entrepreneur spend so much time with a simple ski instructor? Why had he never mentioned his wealth? And most troubling of all, why had he never asked about the ring she'd found if it wasn't his? One evening, as they walked along the snow-covered path back to the resort after dinner, Grace finally gathered her courage. Ryan, can I ask you something? He nodded, snowflakes catching in his dark hair. Why are you really here? In Colorado, I mean. And with me? Ryan's steps slowed. What's brought this on? I know who you are, Grace said quietly. About your company. About your wealth. Ryan's expression hardened slightly. Does that change something between us? It depends, Grace replied, her voice barely audible above the winter wind. It changes things if you've been hiding it because you're laughing at me behind my back. It changes things if I'm just some experiment in how the other half lives. Ryan stopped walking entirely, turning to face her. Is that what you think this is? The hurt in his eyes was unmistakable, but Grace had spent a lifetime being overlooked by people like him. Claire's warnings echoed in her mind. Men like Ryan Sullivan don't end up with girls like you. I don't know what to think, Grace admitted. I just know people like you don't usually spend time with people like me without a reason. People like me? Ryan repeated, his voice cooling. You've decided you know who I am because you know my net worth. That's not fair, Grace protested. You've been hiding things from me. Ryan's laugh held no humor. That's rich. Coming from you. What's that supposed to mean? Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph, handing it to Grace. It showed a younger Ryan standing beside a beautiful woman with auburn hair, both smiling radiantly at the camera. On their fingers gleamed matching wedding bands, and Ryan's was unmistakably the same ring Grace had found. You knew, Grace whispered, her throat tightening. You knew all along I had your ring. Yes. Why didn't you just claim it? Why this whole charade? Ryan's face contorted with a complex mixture of emotions. It wasn't a charade. I threw that ring away that night. I didn't want it back. Then why are you here? Because I wanted to understand the kind of person who would find a valuable ring and try to return it, rather than keep it, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Because when I saw you, really saw you, Grace, I found someone genuine. In a world where I'd stopped believing genuine people existed. Before Grace could respond, Claire's voice cut through the snowy silence. Oh, how touching. They turned to find her standing a few feet away, wrapped in an expensive fur coat, her smile coldly triumphant. Claire, Grace began, but the resort owner's daughter cut her off. Did he tell you the whole story, Grace? About his wife? Claire turned to Ryan, her eyes glittering. She hasn't heard that part, has she? About how your precious Jennifer's plane crashed, about how you were supposed to be on it too. Ryan's face went deathly pale. That's enough. No, I don't think it is, Claire continued, her voice dripping with malice. You see, Grace, our Mr. Sullivan here isn't just wealthy. He's damaged goods. He was supposed to be on that private jet with his wife, but cancelled at the last minute for a business meeting. Survivor's guilt is a terrible thing, isn't it, Ryan? Grace looked at Ryan, whose face had become a mask of pain. That's why he threw the ring away, Claire added, her voice softer now, almost sympathetic as she moved closer to Ryan. I was on the slope that night, Ryan. I saw you. I watched you throw it away and break down crying. I could have told Grace the truth at any time, but I thought maybe you needed this. A fresh start. The calculation in her voice was clear only to Grace. Claire had kept this information to herself, waiting for the perfect moment to use it. Ryan's voice was hollow when he finally spoke. Is that all, Claire? Have you said enough now? Without waiting for an answer, he turned and walked away, his shoulders hunched against more than just the winter cold. Grace stood frozen, watching him go, too stunned to follow. Don't look so heartbroken, Claire said, touching Grace's arm with false comfort. Men like that, they're just passing through our lives. They don't stay with people like us. Us? Grace pulled away from Claire's touch. There is no us, Claire. There never was. Don't be naive, Claire snapped, her mask of sympathy falling away. He was using you as some kind of redemption project. You really think a man worth $500 million who lost his wife in a tragic accident is seriously interested in a nobody ski instructor? Grace stared at Claire, suddenly seeing through her for the first time. The difference between you and me, Claire, isn't money or status. It's that I would never try to build my happiness on someone else's pain. Leaving Claire standing in the snow, Grace headed back to her small staff apartment, her mind whirling with revelations. The ring in her pocket felt heavier than ever. The next morning, Ryan didn't show up for his lesson, nor the next day. By the third day, Grace heard rumors that he had checked out of his rental cabin and left Colorado altogether. A week passed. Grace continued her routine, teaching on the slopes, working extra shifts at the bar, checking the lost and found, bulletin board out of habit, but everything felt hollow, as if the color had been leached from her world. Then came the snowstorm. The worst February blizzard in Colorado's recent history shut down roads and stranded hundreds of tourists at the resort. Grace and the other staff worked overtime to keep everyone comfortable, distributing blankets and setting up cots in the main lodge for those who couldn't return to their cabins. It was past midnight when Grace, exhausted, stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The storm had finally abated, leaving behind a pristine white landscape under a canopy of stars. She pulled Ryan's ring from her pocket, where she'd carried it every day since he left. "You should have told me," she whispered to the empty night, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I know," came a voice from behind her. Grace whirled around to find Ryan standing there, his face haggard, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "You came back," she said, her voice barely audible. "I tried to leave," Ryan admitted, stepping closer. "I made it as far as Denver Airport, but I couldn't get on the plane." "Why?" Ryan took a deep breath, his exhale visible in the frigid air. "Because running away is what I've been doing for 3 years. Because the thought of never seeing you again hurt more than staying and facing the truth." Grace remained silent, waiting. "Jennifer was my high school sweetheart," Ryan continued, his voice raw with emotion. "We built everything together, the company, our life. When she died, I died too, in all the ways that mattered. I wore that ring like a shield, keeping everyone at a distance." He stepped closer to Grace. "That night I threw it away. I was drunk and angry, at myself, at the world, at God. I wanted to feel something besides guilt and grief. And—" "Did you?" Grace asked softly. Ryan nodded. "When I saw your notice, when I met you, I felt something new, something I wasn't ready for." Grace looked down at the ring in her palm. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" "Because I was afraid," Ryan admitted. "Afraid you'd see me differently if you knew about my money, about Jennifer, about the guilt I carry. Afraid you'd treat me like everyone else does, like I'm made of glass or like I'm just a wallet with legs. With you, for the first time in years, I was just— Ryan—" Grace was silent for a long moment, processing his words. "Claire said she saw you that night, on the slope." Ryan's expression darkened. "Claire approached me my second day here. She found out who I was, made it clear she wasn't available. When I wasn't interested, she told me she knew about the ring, about my past. She implied she'd tell you if I didn't. Reconsider her. Offer— She was blackmailing you?" Grace asked, anger flaring. "In a sense," Ryan said. "But by then I already cared too much about you to play her games. I was planning to tell you everything myself, but then I confronted you first," Grace finished. They stood in silence, snowflakes beginning to fall again softly around them. The weight of unspoken words hung between them like the icicles from the lodge roof. "I understand if this is too much," Ryan finally said. "My life is complicated. I'm complicated. You deserve better than someone so broken." Grace looked at him for a long moment, then down at the ring in her hand. With deliberate movements, she placed it in his palm and closed his fingers over it. "We're all broken in some way, Ryan," she said softly. "The question is whether we want to heal alone or together." The force of those simple words hit Ryan like an avalanche, breaking through the final walls he'd built around his heart. In that moment, standing in the snow with a woman brave enough to see him at his worst and still offer compassion, Ryan Sullivan felt something he'd thought forever lost to him: hope. But their moment of connection was abruptly shattered by a commotion from the main lodge. Raised voices echoed across the snow-covered courtyard, and the emergency lights of a snowplow cut through the darkness. "What's happening?" Ryan asked as they hurried toward the noise. They arrived to find Claire's father, Mr. Hamilton, directing emergency crews. Seeing Grace, he called out, "Thank God you're here, Parker. We've got guests stranded at the north side cabins. The access road is blocked by an avalanche." "My parents are up there," Grace gasped, her face draining of color. They were checking on the cabins before the storm hit. As the resort staff mobilized for a rescue operation, the personal drama between Grace, Ryan, and Claire was momentarily forgotten in the face of a more immediate crisis. The night's revelations would have to wait as they faced a more urgent challenge, one that would test not just their feelings for each other, but their very character. The rescue began quickly. Resort staff, emergency crews, and volunteers gathered in the main lodge. Claire stood nearby, her concern more focused on the resort's reputation than the missing people. "We need someone who knows the North." "Terrain, Mr. Hamilton said. "Parker, can you guide a team?" Grace nodded. "I'll need snowmobiles and supplies." "I'm going with you," Ryan added. Claire scoffed. "You? What do you know about rescue?" "I spent 2 years with Alpine Rescue in Switzerland," Ryan replied. "After Jennifer died, it was the only thing that made sense." Silence followed. Mr. Hamilton gave a nod. "Get him the gear." Within 30 minutes, Grace and Ryan were leading a small team up the mountain, battling snowdrifts and wind. The avalanche had blocked the road, but Grace remembered an old maintenance path. "Stay close," she warned. "It gets tricky here." Ryan watched her, struck by how capable she was, no longer the quiet instructor but a confident leader. At the cabins, they found stranded guests, including Grace's parents. Her father explained that a maintenance worker, Tim, was still missing, last seen heading to the equipment shed. Grace turned to Ryan. "They didn't need words. Get everyone back," Grace told the team. "We'll find Tim." "Grace, it's too dangerous," her mother protested. "I know this mountain," she said gently, "and I'm not alone." They hiked toward the shed through knee-deep snow. "Your parents raised an incredible daughter," Ryan said. "They taught me value isn't in what you have, but what you give." The shed was partially collapsed. Inside, Tim was pinned under a beam, injured but conscious. "We're here, Tim," Grace said calmly. "You're going to be okay." For the next hour, she and Ryan worked in sync, freeing Tim piece by piece. When they finally lifted the heavy beam, their eyes met in a moment of quiet understanding. With Tim on a sled, they began the hard trek back through a worsening storm. "How do you know where we're going?" Ryan asked. "Sometimes. You trust what you feel more than what you see." The words echoed in him. Trust what you feel. Something he hadn't done in years. At last they reached the resort. Tim was taken to medics, stable, exhausted. Grace and Ryan sat in the quiet cafe, sipping hot chocolate. Claire approached, her tone unfamiliar, almost respectful. "Tim's family wants to thank you. The doctor said you saved his leg. Maybe his life." Ryan nodded. Claire hesitated, then sat. "I owe you both an apology," she said, looking at Grace. "I've been awful. I was jealous of how people trust you, how you never needed the things I always chased." Turning to Ryan, "What I did to you, it was unforgivable. I saw something I wanted and didn't care who I hurt." "What changed?" Ryan asked. Claire lowered her gaze. "Watching you both on the mountain. You didn't think twice. You just helped. I've never done anything like that." Then she left. "Do you think she meant it?" Grace asked. "Sometimes it takes seeing real courage to realize what you're missing." The next morning, Grace found Ryan on the observation deck. The storm had passed, revealing a landscape both familiar and new. "Your parents are remarkable," Ryan said. "Your dad tried to teach me ski repair over breakfast." "They adopt everyone," Grace smiled. "It's their gift." Ryan pulled the wedding ring from his pocket. "This was the best part of my past," he said. "I shouldn't have tried to throw it away, but I also shouldn't hide behind it." Holding the ring in the sun, he continued, "Jennifer lived fully. It's why I loved her. And it's what I see in you." Then gently he opened his hand and let the ring fall into the snowy valley. "That's littering," Grace said with a watery smile. "Call it planting something new," he replied. He turned to her, taking her hands. "I don't know what the future looks like. I have responsibilities in California, but I know I don't want to face it without you." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm done running. I want to see what this could be. If you'll let me." Grace looked at him. This man who had walked into her quiet life carrying grief and wealth, neither of which defined him now. "Maybe we've both spent too long being invisible in different ways," she said. "Maybe it's time we let ourselves be seen." Ryan's smile was like sunrise, warm, full of promise. As he pulled her into an embrace, Grace knew, some things you find aren't objects. They're possibilities. They're people, and they change everything. 1 year later, a small shop in downtown Denver displayed a sign that read, "Second Chance Jewelry, where lost things find new purpose." Inside, Grace and Ryan worked side by side, their lives now deeply intertwined, something neither could have predicted that snowy day when a lost ring changed everything. The concept was simple but meaningful. They collected lost or discarded jewelry, restored it, and helped it find new owners. Each piece came with a card telling a fragment of its journey, where it had been found, what it may have meant once, and what it could represent now. "I can't believe how far this has come," Grace said while arranging a new display. "We've returned over 200 pieces," Ryan added, "and given many more a new beginning, kind of like us." Their relationship had grown steadily. Ryan still worked for his tech company remotely and had created a foundation funding winter sports programs for local kids. Grace now served as its director. His wealth had gone from a divide to a resource they used for good. The shop bell chimed. Claire walked in, changed by the year as well, more grounded since volunteering with mountain rescue after the avalanche. "Found this in Lost and Found," she said, placing a velvet box on the counter. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. "It's beautiful." "Thanks, Claire," Grace replied warmly. "My dad's retirement party is next weekend. He hopes you both can come." "We'll be there," Ryan said with a nod. After Claire left, Ryan turned the bracelet over in his hand. "Funny, isn't it? How we lose things, find things, and sometimes end up exactly where we're meant to be. That's pretty philosophical for a tech guy," Grace teased. "I've had a good teacher," he said, kissing her forehead. Later that evening, as they prepared to close up, an elderly woman appeared at the door just as Ryan flipped the sign to "Closed." "We're just," he began, but her expression gave him pause. "I heard you might help me find something," she said softly. "My husband's pocket watch. He passed last spring. It got lost during my move." Grace stepped forward, gently. "Do you have a photo?" The woman showed them an old picture of a gold pocket watch with detailed engravings. Ryan and Grace exchanged a look. Someone had brought in that exact watch just a week earlier. "I think we might have good news," Ryan said kindly. As they returned the watch and watched the woman tear up in joy, Ryan reached for Grace's hand, a quiet gesture full of meaning, gratitude, healing, and the hope of second chances. That night, walking home through falling snow, Grace looked up at him. "Do you ever wonder how different life would be if I hadn't found your ring?" Ryan thought for a moment. "I don't think we're defined by what we lose or even what we find. We're defined by what we choose to do with those moments. And sometimes," Grace added, "we find what we didn't even know we were looking for." Ryan nodded. "For years, I thought my story ended with Jennifer. But loving her was just one chapter. Finding you didn't erase the past, it gave me the courage to write the next part." At their apartment steps, snow clinging to their coats, he looked up at the stars. "Sometimes the things we lose come back in ways we never imagined," Grace smiled. "And sometimes what we find changes us forever." In the end, the most powerful truths often reveal themselves in the quietest ways. A glint in the snow, a stranger's kindness, the courage to begin again. For Grace and Ryan, a lost wedding ring became something much greater. A reminder that even in our most broken moments, we are never beyond redemption. We are simply waiting to be found by the most unexpected hands and hearts.